It is Wednesday. It is the 21st of May. I'm Conn-young. This is ARIRANG News live from Seoul. Our top stories today. The nation's prosecutors finally gets inside a religious facility as part of their weeks-long manhunt for the de facto owner of the ferry that sank last month. A Roman Catholic cardinal from South Korea is in North Korea for the first time ever, sparking speculation that his trip might be aimed at preparing for a possible visit by Pope Francis this summer. And at least 118 people are dead after a pair of bombings in the central Nigerian city of Jos. Authorities warn the death toll could climb as they search the debris for more of the injured. The Islamist militant group Boko Haram is the prime suspect. But we begin with the latest in the prosecution's probe into last month's ferry disaster that killed nearly 300 people. Prosecutors and police entered a religious compound in Gyeonggi-do province roughly 2 hours ago, and where the de facto owner of the sunken ferry operator is believed to be hiding out. We are joined live by our Park Jiwon on the line. Hello there, Jiwon.
Conn-young, prosecutors and police finally made their way into the religious compound in Anseong, Gyeonggi-do province about 2 hours ago today to execute an arrest warrant for Yoo Byung-eun, the practical owner of the Sewol-ho ferry operator. Hundreds of members of Yoo's religious cult who have been surrounding the estate for the past few days as human shields allowed only investigator prosecutors in. About 1,000 prosecutors and police have been deployed to the scene, raising the prospects of a possible confrontation. Investigators are searching for the 73-year-old Yoo inside the 230,000 square meter compound, but are suspecting that he may be hiding elsewhere, like at the home of one of his believers. Wednesday's operation came after Yoo had ignored previous orders by prosecutors to show up for questioning over embezzlement, tax evasion, and malpractice charges. The authorities believe there may be some causal link there with the ferry operator's lack of investment in safety drills and personnel management.
Now, Jiwon, prosecutors are also executing an arrest warrant for Yoo's eldest son, Yoo Byung-eun. Tell us more about that.
Yes, Conn-young. Prosecutors are also trying to arrest Yoo Byung-eun, the first son of Yoo Byung-eun, on charges of tax evasion and embezzlement of funds from company affiliates owned by the Yoo family. He was seen at Incheon International Airport buying a one-way ticket to France just 3 days after the ferry accident happened last month. However, as he was already banned from travel by the authorities, he didn't get on board a plane. Since then, his whereabouts have been unknown. Regarding Yoo's other children staying in foreign countries who haven't responded to prosecutors' orders for questionings, the authorities are trying to get them extradited through cooperation with other countries.
All right, thank you, Jiwon, for that. That was ARIRANG News' Park Jiwon on the prosecution's efforts to manhunt down the de facto owner of the ferry disaster. President Park Geun-hye returned home earlier today from her 40-hour-long trip to the UAE, but it doesn't mean rest time for the president. She has no official schedule for the next couple of days, but she is expected to start the process of identifying a new prime minister and reshuffling her cabinet. ARIRANG's Park GeunHye has the details.
When President Park apologized this week for the government's poor response to the ferry disaster, she chose not to mention her plans to shake up the cabinet. But as she told the families of the victims late last week, follow-up measures to the accident, including a reshuffle, are expected to speed up in the coming days.
후속 조치들을 면밀하게 지금 세우고 있습니다.
Pundits are carefully looking at who will be the president's candidate for prime minister, with the current prime minister Chung Won set to resign to take responsibility for the government's lax response to the ferry disaster. They say the appointment of a new prime minister will mark the starting point of the cabinet shakeup. Speculation is rife that the nomination of a new prime minister could come as early as this week, as it's already been almost a month since Chung offered to step down. Those held most responsible for the poor handling of the disaster, the ministers of oceans and fisheries, public administration, and education, are most likely to face the chop, but there are growing calls for a clean sweep. Ruling and opposition party lawmakers are demanding the entire cabinet as well as senior officials at the presidential office step down. Pundits say President Park's new government lineup will affect how the public evaluates the sincerity of her apology and will play a key role in whether she wins back public sentiment. Hwang Ji, ARIRANG News.
Now, just 2 weeks to go until Koreans head to the polls for the June 4th local elections. Recent polls suggest voters living in key regions are warming to the main opposition party. Analysts say this could spell a big election day victory for the New Politics Alliance for Democracy, which was formed just 2 months ago. Our correspondent Yoo Byung-eun reports on how last month's ferry disaster has given the momentum to the opposition party.
The effect of the government's poor handling of the Sewol-ho ferry disaster is being reflected in recent polling, which shows that the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is gaining support in Seoul, Incheon, and Gyeonggi-do province. According to a poll conducted this week by TNS Korea on more than 14,000 likely voters, the ruling Saenuri Party's candidate for Seoul Mayor, Chung Mong-jun, is more than 15 points behind incumbent Mayor Park Won-soon, who was at 51% support. It's a similar story in the city of Incheon, where the ruling party mayoral candidate Yoo Byung-eun is trailing incumbent Song Young-gil of the opposition party by more than 10 percentage points. The race for governor of Gyeonggi-do province is much tighter. Just 0.9 percentage points separate Saenuri candidate Nam Kyung-pil and opposition candidate Kim Jin-pyo in the TNS Korea polling. All three local races are considered significant on the national stage, as the three areas boast about half of Korea's total population. Earning victories in these races can give a party a full head of steam heading into future legislative and presidential elections. In other important local races, such as in the conservative stronghold city of Busan and in the liberal stronghold city of Gwangju, the polling fell more along party lines. According to a survey conducted by the National Election Commission last week, 55.8% of respondents said they will vote on election day, up 1 percentage point from the 2010 local elections. Campaigning is set to begin on Thursday, and public safety has emerged as a hot-button issue in light of April's ferry disaster. Yoo Byung-eun, ARIRANG News.
Now, South Korean Cardinal Andrew Yum-soo-jung made history on this Wednesday morning, becoming the first Korean Roman Catholic leader to cross the inter-Korean border into the north. And with Pope Francis scheduled to come to Seoul in August, expectations are running high as to whether he will become the first pope to visit North Korea. ARIRANG News' Hwang Seong-hee reports.
Cardinal Andrew Yum-soo-jung became the first Korean Roman Catholic leader to ever cross the inter-Korean border on Wednesday. His day trip to the Kaesong Industrial Complex comes amid escalating tensions on the peninsula, although the South Korean government says the visit is in no way political.
The objective of the visit is to tour the joint factory zone and to meet with South Korean Catholics. There are no politically motivated meetings scheduled.
It hasn't been confirmed whether Cardinal Yum will hold Mass at the Kaesong complex, but he has in the past been vocal about his desire to do so. He had planned to hold Mass at the Joint Industrial Park last December, but that plan was scrapped at the last minute following the execution of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's uncle Chang Song-taek. North Korea claims its people enjoy the right to religious freedom, but authorities are known to crack down on religious activity, deeming it a challenge to the leadership. The Cardinal's trip comes 3 months before Pope Francis is scheduled to arrive in South Korea for a visit, fueling speculation that the Holy Father could also make a stop in the north. Pope Francis, who has shown a great deal of interest in peace and reconciliation between the two Koreas, is expected to deliver a message for the entire Korean peninsula when he visits Seoul in August. For now, the attention is on whether Cardinal Yum's trip will contribute to thawing inter-Korean relations. Hwang Seong-hee, ARIRANG News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's push to restore his nation's right to collective self-defense or to come to the aid of an ally under attack has certainly gotten the attention of neighboring countries. Tokyo says a change is necessary to defend itself, but others aren't so sure, as experts are wondering aloud what the fallout may be. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The opinions in Japan's push to restore its right to collective self-defense are varied and strong. A senior researcher in the United States, weighing in on the latest developments, says South Korea, Japan, and the United States need to hold trilateral talks on the matter, particularly regarding the range of influence Tokyo could have on the Korean peninsula after the right to collective self-defense takes effect. Larry Nish of the Congressional Research Service said South Korea is undoubtedly against Japan's push, and the key issue was determining how much is Washington willing to compromise with Seoul on the matter. Even inside Japan, there is resistance. The Japanese daily Asahi Shimbun conducted a public opinion poll last month on Prime Minister Abe's push to extend the role of Japan's self-defense forces. 63% of Japanese people polled were against the move, just 29% were for it, leaving questions about whether Abe will be able to move the public and politicians. Mindy Kotler, the director of the U.S.-based research center Asia Policy Point, said Abe is seeking to reinterpret Japan's pacifist constitution too hastily. She pointed out that the administration is not fit to handle the task, as they have been unable or unwilling so far to resolve historical differences with neighboring countries. That said, most sources within Washington say Japan's call to self-defense reform will strengthen the nation's alliance with the U.S. and in turn enhance security on the Korean peninsula. Bruce Klingner, a senior research fellow for Northeast Asia at the Heritage Foundation, says without Japan's support, it will be impossible to defend Seoul in an event of an armed clash between the two Koreas. He added that it's imperative to bolster defenses to counter threats from Pyongyang and Beijing. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping have pledged to forge closer bilateral ties amid festering tensions with the United States. The leaders met in Shanghai Tuesday on the opening day of joint military drills that are likely to draw disapproval from Seoul as they overlap with South Korea's recently expanded air defense ID zone. Shin Se-min reports.
Meeting in Shanghai Tuesday, Presidents Xi and Putin agreed to strengthen their economic and military ties. They also held in-depth talk about North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. Praising the tightening military ties between the two sides, President Putin said he was convinced Moscow and Beijing could forge a strong strategic partnership and that bilateral military cooperation was developing very well. Putin's visit to China coincided with the beginning of the two countries' joint naval exercises, Joint Sea 2014. The drills have raised red flags in Seoul as they overlap with South Korea's expanded air defense identification zone. Neither Moscow nor Beijing notified the South Korean government prior to its announcement. It's the first time an international military exercise has taken place within Korean waters since the expansion of the air defense zone last December. On the business front, the two leaders failed to narrow their differences on a natural gas supply agreement worth of $400 billion. A 30-year contract between the Russian state-controlled fuel supplier and Chinese National Petroleum Corporation was left unsigned as both sides couldn't agree on a price at which Russia would supply gas. Moscow wants to find new buyers for its gas outside of Europe. This is because U.S. allies in Europe have imposed sanctions against Moscow for its annexation of Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. In regards to the security situation on the Korean Peninsula, both sides said they were concerned about North Korea's nuclear program and the simmering political and military tensions between the two Koreas. China and Russia stressed the long-stalled six-party talks on North Korea's denuclearization are the only effective way of reaching a deal everyone is happy with. They called on all parties to do more to secure peace and stability in the region. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Conn-young live from Seoul.
Mobile shopping market for the dual use of the Korean name East and the Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. More violence in Nigeria. This time, twin bomb attacks in the central city have killed at least 118, but authorities warn the toll could climb. Although no one has claimed responsibility, the Islamist militant group Boko Haram yet again is being blamed for the blasts. ARIRANG's Yoo Byung-eun has more on the latest in a series of sustained attacks that's leaving the African country reeling.
2 car bombs exploded in Nigeria's central city of Jos on Tuesday, killing at least 118 local civilians. One ripped through the center of a busy market, another half an hour later outside a nearby hospital, killing some rescue workers. A local official says the death toll could rise further as rescue teams continue to recover bodies from the smoldering debris. It's not yet clear who's responsible for the attack, but Boko Haram is the prime suspect. The militant group has been carrying out a series of bomb attacks across the center of Nigeria, trying to overthrow the government and create an Islamic state. If Boko Haram is to blame, Tuesday's double bomb blast would make it their deadliest single attack in 5 years. President Goodluck Jonathan issued a statement late Tuesday expressing sympathy for the victims and reassuring the public that the government remains committed to winning the war against terror. Terrorism in Nigeria has been under the international spotlight ever since Boko Haram kidnapped more than 200 schoolgirls back in mid-April. The girls who remain unaccounted for are reportedly being threatened to be auctioned off to become wives of militants. The campaign to get those girls back continues in Nigeria.
There is hope. There is a lot of hope. We believe the girls are safe. We believe the girls are alive. And we believe with the tremendous support the Nigerian military is getting, we believe that the girls will be rescued and returned home.
But fear is rising. As evident by this latest attack, Boko Haram is becoming increasingly vicious in their campaign for an Islamic state. More than 1,000 people are believed to have been killed by the militant group this year. Yoo Byung-eun, ARIRANG News.
It's day 2 under martial law over in Thailand, and its interim government has proposed a new date for its general elections, August 3rd, after its election commission last week said it was logistically impossible to hold elections by the previously set July deadline. Thailand's caretaker prime minister said he will meet with the electoral body today to finalize a date as early as next week. He also promised to speak with the country's army chief as soon as possible to end the political turmoil that has killed 28 people and injured some 700 since protests began November last year. Thailand is under military rule after martial law was declared throughout the land early morning Tuesday. And moving on to some economic news, the Korean government will spend an additional $7.6 billion by the end of next month to help boost domestic demand hit by last month's Sewol-ho ferry sinking. Now, at a policy meeting with the ruling Saenuri Party Wednesday, Finance Minister Hyun-ho-seok said that the move is part of government efforts to make sure the recovery of the domestic economy won't be derailed by the disaster. He added the government is also considering tax breaks and other financial support for the travel industry and domestic-oriented sectors that were badly affected by the tragedy. And now it's time for our daily check on arts and culture. And of course, our Im Yoon-hee joins us live. And she has a story on a band that many of our viewers are probably quite fond of, including myself. Good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon, Conn-young.
So I hear ABBA is in town, or are they not?
Right, so this Swedish pop group has many fans all over the world, including here in Korea. And so currently there is a traveling artwork exhibition that you can check out here in Korea. And it features a lot of the works of the group. And so let's take a look now.
During ABBA time, I had my first girlfriend, so always stay in our memories. At the time, no glasses.
Who doesn't know ABBA? Everyone knows ABBA. Everyone knows her songs. I have a dream, a song to sing.
Agneta, Benny, Bjorn, and Annie Fried. These are the faces of one of the world's most successful bands, ABBA. It's been over 40 years since the group took the world by fire with their spangled jumpsuits, big boots, and catchy tunes. And to celebrate, this exhibition showcases the artwork from their various album covers through the years, as well as a display of the recently created ABBA Gold Anniversary Edition, a collection of their greatest hits.
In our country, the melody is very important. Fast-paced songs tend to appeal to Koreans. So for this photo exhibition, we're displaying the artwork from all of the ABBA album covers, including 44 pictures from their recently released photo book.
It all started in 1974 when they won the Eurovision Song Contest with Waterloo. Then the Swedish musical sensation jumped to the center of the international spotlight. The album, named after the hit single, was the first album created by the now-coined ABBA group. After Waterloo came the smash hit Dancing Queen from the album Arrival, the first album to showcase the signature backwards B, a look that would go on to be a trademark of the band. It's during these years that ABBA defined their style and became a worldwide hit, selling over 370 million albums. The album showcased here.
In 1981, they released the album Visitors shortly after Benny and Annie Fried divorced. Eventually, the group fell apart, and that was the end of ABBA. People hoped for a reunion, and even after 30 years, they're still waiting, showing how people can't forget ABBA.
It takes passion to create music like ABBA, and unfortunately, like other artists, they had their ups, but they ended on a down. Even if they went their separate ways, their songs touched the hearts of millions, of all genders and ages, and will go down in history as the one and only ABBA.
You know, I was a very little girl when ABBA was, making the biggest hits, and I even remember some of or most of their songs, from Money, Money, Money to Dancing Queen to, to all sorts of songs. And, they're so influential that we can hear it in all sorts of genres.
Right, so they actually in the late 70s released ABBA the movie, and this movie followed them through their tour through parts of Australia. It was a little bit of a fictitious plot, but it was very exciting, and it actually turned into a cult movie for all of the ABBA followers and their fan members. So
Right,
it was very
and,
exciting.
Right, and ABBA's music was probably most popularized by Mamma Mia, right?
Exactly. Have you seen the musical?
I have
movie?
a number of times.
Right, so the musical came out first. I think everyone has heard of at least the musical or the movie. There was a movie adaptation later on, and these two really popularized the whole ABBA movie and the songs and all the music from ABBA. Now, the musical actually was nominated for a Tony Award later on in 2002, and so you could really see through the popularity of the music and the musicals, how ABBA really is something that can be enjoyed through the generations and not just, through the 70s and 80s when they were really coming out.
Right, and these exhibitions that are to be featured across the country, I believe, what aspects of ABBA do they bring out?
Right, so it shows all of their album covers, mostly from the very start, from the very first album to the very end, and you can kind of see the career, the routines of relationships between the group members as well as they went through and made each album. But there's also photos from their photo book that was recently released, and that contains pictures as well of their career through the years. And so you can really get a taste of the whole ABBA experience, not just the beginning or the end, you get a taste of the whole thing.
All right, well, great exhibition for those ABBA fans out there. All right, thank you so much for that report, Yoon-hee, and we will see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Good afternoon. According to the lunar calendar, today is Soman in Korea, which represents the start of the rice planting season for farmers, and it's also regarded as the beginning of summer, and the weather today is actually following suit. Now today we have partly cloudy skies nationwide, which hasn't put an end to our high UV levels, which remain particularly high over in the southern regions. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul tops out at 27 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 26 and 27 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 23, Dokdo at 20, while Mankungang tops out at 9. Now as for the weather conditions down in Chindo at the site of the Sewol ferry disaster, it's foggy currently, but however the tides and winds are very calm as the nape tide periods continues. Now that's all I have at this moment. I'll be back with more updates at 6.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for that, and thank you for watching. That's just about all from me at this hour. I'm Conn-young. Check back with us at 4 p.m. Korea time for Business Today.